loud. There we go. Okay. All right. No guarantee that the sound is going to be this great because I believe I'm using my computer microphone, but I'm going to turn it up at least. And at least I can hear Cindy, and that's what's most important. So welcome to She Became Visible. And Cynthia, she was my very first guest. I believe this is episode 8 or 9, I'm not sure. But she just had such a wealth of information. I just like, I need more. I've got to get more. So I invited her back and she made arrangements to make it happen. And you're out in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, that's right. Central Pennsylvania.
Okay. What is your weather today?
It's been all over the place. We had sleet and snow over the weekend, and today it's 70 degrees. So 77 tomorrow.
That's insane.
I
That's
know.
so crazy. I know my kids up in Washington State had snow.
Yeah.
31 degrees, and it was 96 down here. It's like the world is coming to an end. But
Yeah.
anyway, so we're gonna get started. Cynthia, I wanted to start out by just reading something that I had found online. And did I throw my first page away? Let me see what I did with the first page. But basically, it was statistics of caregivers, and it was saying that it was talking about caregiver burnout. And it's one of those things that I think as you age. Okay, so that was one. Where'd 2 go? There we go. So as you age, sometimes your caregiving involves taking care of your parents and taking care of your children, and you still have a job, and you still have maybe a partner of some kind, and that's where the stress comes in for caregiving. Usually, though, in cases like that, there's a timeline, 1 or 2 years, maybe 5 years, something like that. And I've often heard people reflect back on the time that they had to have mom move in or dad move into the house, and they had to be a caregiver. And I don't know how these women do it if they've got a full-time job and now they've got a dad that needs care, and it's just crazy. But the statistics were showing that 80% of long-term care in the United States is provided by unpaid or informal caregivers. And of these, 61% are women. Most have reached middle age, and 59% also have jobs. I thought those were amazing statistics. So it was talking about, though caregiving stress can affect anyone providing care, research shows that 75% of caregivers are, like I said, they're trying to do everything. They're trying to do the kids and the job and the whole thing. And so, of course, the recommendation for anybody that's under any kind of stress, they recommend that we take time out, that we get a break, that we go for a walk. And I think that there are certain kinds of stress, like, for example, if you have some kind of a very high stressful job and you're sitting at your computer and you're on a deadline and you've got to get this out and you're just going crazy, taking a break, going for a walk, and maybe just letting that works.
Yeah.
But for long-term caregiving, and I'm not talking 2 to 5 years, I'm talking 25, 30, 40 years.
Right.
That oftentimes the bath, the book, the private time, the go for a walk, get some exercise, watch your diet, it doesn't work. And I think it's because there's a certain stage where you realize that the stress that you're under doesn't have a timeline.
Right.
And so you started to say something which was like, this is why I have you back. You started to talk about
chronic sorrow, chronic grief.
Yes. So
yes.
Talk about that, because I don't think that it's the chronic part that people don't understand. So talk about that.
Well, I did some research a while back on parents who have kids with disabilities and on caregiving in general. And it talks about how when your life changes in ways you're not expecting, it's a loss, and it's not something that you can just grieve and get over, because it's being brought up again over and over again. Like every time there's a new milestone, first it was like my kids weren't walking and our neighbors' kids were running around the yard, and then going to school, and you go in and volunteer in the school and your kid's not reading, but the other kids are reading and running to the library. And so every time there's little reminders of how life is different than what you expected. And I'm not saying it's bad different. I'm just saying that sometimes we have to give up the dream that we had, and we have a different dream, but it keeps coming up in different ways. So the stage I'm at now, my sister's got grandchildren and really enjoying being a grandma. And I love seeing all those little great nieces and nephews growing up and enjoying the baby giggles and the birthdays and fun trips with grandma to the zoo. And but at the same time, I'm sad that I'm not going to have that, and that my life path is different. I get to enjoy other things, but there's some level of chronic grief that goes on. It doesn't mean I'm depressed. I'm allowed to have these feelings, and I have to keep reprocessing them. I think under other circumstances in life, when things come up that are stressors or whatever, you deal with it and you move on, and it's not still there, it's resolved. And in this case, it might be sort of resolved in me emotionally at that time, but the situation is not going to be resolved until I'm not walking on this earth anymore. So there's a lot of studies about that. Someone once described, I think, as like in the ocean, like when you're little and you first get in and the waves just knock you down. That's like the initial onslaught of the grief. But as you get older, there's still the ripples, and sometimes still bigger waves come and they might still knock you down, but you're still being affected by those waves when they come. They're impacting you in some way. So it just might get easier to handle them over time.
Right.
Yeah, but it's still there. The background of grief is still there.
Right. And I love the way that you described that, with something that's chronic. And it would be interesting to talk to someone. Like, I remember I was probably only 21,
Mhm.
and we were attending a church service, and the gentleman that was speaking talked about how they had a child that had passed away, and
Mhm.
how that you don't ever get over the grief, and you
Yeah.
have other children. And
Right.
sometimes people think, well, oh, but you had other children.
Yeah.
And he was explaining how you still don't get over that grief.
No, you
And I
don't.
remember at the time not being able to understand that. And so, but I will say, in the case of being a caregiver, it's not only the sadness that you feel, it's also the work.
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop.
That
And
adds a level to it, because you never catch a break or have time to process or anything.
right. And I think it's also interesting. You'll be able to relate to this, but my son is going in for surgery tomorrow. And so the hospital calls, and of course they've got to do the rundown. They have to ask you all the questions. And one of the questions was, does he have seizures? And I said, yes. And she was like, oh, when did that happen? And I said, well, actually, he just started having seizures in September. He's 36 years old. He's never had seizures before. And in September, I was putting him in bed, and I laid him on the bed, and he started having a seizure. My husband was out of town, because that's always when things happen. They
Yeah.
never happen when there's anybody around. So my husband was out of town, and I remember watching him, and I was standing over him, and I'm watching him, and I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. He's not, he's vomiting or anything like that. So there wasn't an airway problem. He was breathing. It was just new. It was something new. And then, so I told my husband about it when he came back, and then he didn't have, nothing happened again. And then a few weeks later, it happened again. And so then I started calling. Well, I better call. So I called the doctor, and of course, you know how you have to have a referral. And so you get the referral, and then you call the doctor, and I'm trying, this was last year. So there was still the whole, we're going to do video doctor's appointments. We're not going to do real
Okay.
life ones. Anyway, Barrow's Neurology, there's a huge neurology hospital here in Phoenix. And so I thought, oh, wow, what a blessing that I live in this place with all these neurologists. And I called, and they said, well, they only see patients on Thursday, and this particular neurologist can only see you. So there would be probably the end of the month. And I was like, wow, okay. And then it got moved, to another date. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. It's not that big a deal. And bottom line, what are they going to do? They're going to run some tests. They're going to put him on some kind of phenobarbital or some kind of medication. I don't want to put him on medication. It's not that severe. It's not, so I'm not going to do anything. All I would be doing is going to the doctor, having them say, interesting. Well, let's just keep an eye on him, that kind of thing. So I'm like, yeah. So anyway, so the hospital calls yesterday to do a thing. And when she kept saying, does your primary care doctor know about? Anyway, so it's just other people's reactions to things that we have learned to really kind of grade. I'm going to give this a 1 to 10. We've decided it's a 3. And it's not going to rattle us because we've had other things that have rattled us more. And that's surprising to other people. But it's ongoing. Like you said, it never, it's every day is like, oh, what are we dealing with now? This is
a new normal.
Yeah.
I told somebody the other day, I really hate that phrase.
The new
I'm
normal.
tired of new normals. Yes.
Gosh, yeah.
So tired. Every time there's a new diagnosis.
Right.
So
So now your kids are not, you have one son that is living independently.
he's here, but he's taking care of his own needs.
Okay.
The oldest one, he works full-time doing online tech support from home for Intuit. So he does like QuickBooks and other products. He just got that job June a year ago, and he's done really well with it, and we've been so proud of him. So they set him up with the computer, all the online training, everything was from home. He only had to do one orientation day at their office, and otherwise everything from home. And it's been his first really full-time job with benefits and everything. He's doing great, trying to save money to get out and get his own place. But he has Asperger's and bipolar disorder, but very stable, very smart kid. And I'm very proud of him. He also has celiac disease, so he's having to manage diet and other things. And he's really been learning to take care of himself. So
is that frightening for you? I mean, are you still kind of monitoring his diet?
No, he lived in what we call a rehabilitative residence for like 2 years here after high school, where they work with people who have different mental illness to be independent and take care of themselves. They have a coach that lives in a house nearby. So he did 2 years, hard years of working on taking care of himself, budgeting his money, doing his own grocery shopping, doing his own cooking, learning to live with 2 roommates and keep the house up and all of that. So when he graduated from that program, he moved home because finances and places to live, but we've maintained that routine here. So he takes care of his own cooking, his own doctor appointments. He arranges with me if he needs a ride somewhere because he doesn't have a driver's license yet. But he schedules all of that and is living as independently as possible, just happens to be under the same roof with his family. So
that's fabulous.
Yes.
Okay. So you're not having to cook meals or monitor his gluten or anything like that?
No, he's doing that himself. Plus, if he has a gluten exposure, it gives him some pretty immediate feedback in how he feels that day. So he'll get pretty sick. So he's good about reading labels now. And it helps that both of my sisters have celiac. So especially my middle sister, she's been able to kind of mentor him and share recipes. And when they came when did they come in the fall for a Penn State home game. She took him into my mom's kitchen and was showing him how to make her cinnamon roll recipe and all these other things that she does with her gluten-free recipes. So that was
Right.
great to have that for him. That's way off topic, but
No,
that's
yeah,
another diagnosis. Like 3 years
Yeah,
ago, we found out he
right.
had celiac, and it just
Right.
keeps, there's always, it's a moving target.
Right,
There's
right,
always something new. Our kids are
right.
complex and we're figuring it out.
Right.
Um,
So now when you talked about that program that your
yeah.
son was able to do, how
Mhm.
did you find out about that?
We, he had to have certain diagnoses to qualify. He had been involved with the mental health supports here in our county. He had been at risk of being hospitalized in the year or two previous to that placement there. And we were, with him graduating high school, we were looking at what were the next steps for him. And the county worked with this agency, and we were able to meet with them and come up with a plan for him to be placed there and living there. It was like a mile from our house. It's actually really close by.
Wow.
This one agency owns a row of townhomes. There's like 6 of them, I think. The house in the middle is where the staff is available 24/7. And then they've got 3 people in each of the townhomes who are consumers with mental illness, and they're working with the staff who's like their coach on managing their own conditions and getting the right supports in place and getting employment or counseling or whatever they need. So it
Wow.
was great.
So if there was somebody living, not in Pennsylvania and did it help that your son had had a diagnosis throughout his educational system? Like,
I think so.
okay,
It helped in that people knew that he had a mental illness. It wasn't just Asperger's, and he wasn't just being a brat or something, that
right,
he had bipolar disorder. So when he ended up in crisis, it wasn't, we always hear these horrible stories of like the police coming and
right,
there
right.
being an incident. We didn't have that experience. He was already registered with our local crisis line. So all we would have to do is call the crisis line, and they would send out a trained mental health worker to come and
Wow.
assess him. And that was it was after a little crisis like that where we were able to get him to stabilize and not have to be admitted to the hospital, that we were able to work with the county to get him this rehabilitative placement for his long-term goals of
Okay.
being able to live independently.
Okay.
So, but he had to be already on the radar with a diagnosis and a case manager
Right.
and all of that. So
It's so you have to make a decision at certain points in their life. And I
right.
remember when we have a grandson that's living with us now, and we went through a lot of different testing, for him. He
Mhm.
never got a test for being on the autism spectrum, but I know he is. And so there were times when I would think, oh, if he just could have gotten that diagnosis, he would have
Mhm.
gotten different help. Instead, he got attention deficit disorder, and it got him an IEP, and it got him a lot of help as far as being able to his grades and credit for
Mhm.
the work he did, and it's going to get him a high school graduation, but I don't think it really got him the help that he needed. But I can see now looking at him, and I'm thinking, you're not working as a 19-year-old man. You're
Right.
not functioning in that area,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
because,
Emotionally,
right.
yeah, much younger. That's my son also.
Right. And so, so the caregiver, even caring for himself, he's almost like you're working with like maybe an 8 or a 9-year-old.
Mhm.
But he doesn't have that diagnosis to get him the help that he needs for that. But yet people
Right.
expect him to act like a 19-year-old.
Right.
And that's always been a problem for him because he's a big guy. So he
Okay.
looks, so and then, but then you start hearing things like, oh, if you have a diagnosis of autism, you might not be able to, you won't be able to be in the military, or it's going to
Right.
stop you, so you're always going back and forth. Do I want that label in his medical records?
Yeah, I get that.
But so that's a hard one. But I love that. That's a great idea though, about what can you do before it gets to the crisis stage to get some mental health?
Yeah, that's one of the things we were glad about with when we moved to this state in 2005 was the children's mental health support system. It's not ideal by any means, but the one that we had, the state we came from, was broken and terrible. And when we ended up in crisis with him in that state, we had to be at the point of having to put him in the state hospital before they would even consider providing in-home supports to try to keep him in the community. But depending upon what time of the year that crisis occurred, the
Right.
county might have already spent all their money. So they'll say, yeah, we agree, you need 25 hours a week of intensive supports at home, but our money is gone for this year. So we're just going to make a note here. And we realize we know you're screwed. So, but nothing we can do.
Wow.
No, they didn't say it that way, but
No, but yeah, that's the reality, budget.
that was the reality of, yeah, our money is spent. We realize you need support, but we can't help you. So you started the system there was then on July 1, if you had a crisis, that was the day to have a crisis, because then the money was free for the new fiscal year and you could
Right.
get supports, or if you knew you were going to need support, apply for it as early in the fiscal year as possible in order to get it funded. So moving here was good because in Pennsylvania, if your child has a diagnosed disability, it doesn't even really matter what it is. There's a loophole, they call it, that allows you to try to automatically get Medicaid. So no matter what your primary insurance is and what they do or do not cover, Medicaid covers a lot of those therapies that you can't get covered elsewhere. And of course, the providers pool is limited, but a lot of like the behavioral health people, Pennsylvania also had the law about, they were one of the first states to mandate the applied behavioral analysis, the ABA therapy. And because prior to that, insurance companies wouldn't pay for it. So, but in Pennsylvania, if you had a child with a diagnosis, Medicaid would cover all that stuff. So, so the crisis line, the case management, all of that was there for him once we moved here.
So tell me again, because I'm trying to remember from last time, you researched out the best place to move my family to get the services I need. And so you were living in the Midwest?
No,
correct?
we were in Virginia.
Oh, you're in Virginia. Okay.
In Northern Virginia, the Washington, D.C. area.
Which blows my mind.
I know.
Washington, D.C. should just be like overflowing with programs. And
well, the city of D.C. itself is not good at all. And then Virginia at the time was 49th out of the 50 states in spending per capita on children with disabilities. And like I told you, like the mental health supports, we had to be ready to place him at the state hospital in Staunton 3 hours away before they would even remotely consider. So he had to be very unstable before they would even consider it. And then if there was no money, we were out of luck anyways. So the funny thing is, though, the state that we moved to and the school district here that is so wonderful is my hometown. So
oh my gosh.
yes.
Okay. So
I knew
like you packed up the station wagon and drove into who knows where.
No, I knew it was a good place to raise your family.
Okay.
It just, the question was, were these other supports going to be there? It's in the middle of nowhere, but so I have to drive for medical specialty stuff. If we go to Pittsburgh or Harrisburg, Hershey, Philly, in this little rural area, the specialties aren't there as much, especially pediatric specialties. But they're all adults now. So we're finding, the adult specialists there are. So that's a lot easier for us.
That was, I remember that being, once they turned 18, we had to get legal guardianship for him. And even dealing with my grandson, he's 19, he's an adult, he's just finishing up his senior year, but he doesn't need any kind of adult signatures on anything.
Right, because he can make decisions.
Yeah, because legally he can make decisions for himself, and yet he can't. And so that's the hard part when doctors, and I'll go, let me give you his phone number, because you're not going to talk to me, but can I
Right.
just tell you a few things before you talk to him, you know?
Yeah.
But oh my gosh. Okay, so your other son and daughter, they're also living at home.
Right.
They are also out of the school system, correct?
Yes, they are now. Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of a program do you have? What's set up for them?
Uh, well, we've been kind of, COVID's been hard. So,
Oh, yeah.
you want me to talk like before and
Yeah,
yeah,
the
uh,
reality, yeah.
yeah. Well, before times, uh,
In the
Christopher
old
had
days.
a community-based day program that he went to on the days that he wasn't working. He had a job at the bowling alley that he loved. He had a job coach that was supporting him there. I would hear all the stories every night of everything that happened at the bowling alley when he came home. The day program was one of the few in our area that's like 100% community based. It was great. They would pick them up every day, like 8 o'clock. They went to where their center was, but they didn't stay there. They had like a cafeteria menu of, here's your options for today. We can go to the library. We can go volunteer for Meals on Wheels. We can go fishing at Fisherman's Paradise. We can do go volunteer at the thrift store, the faith-based thrift store, or they had all this menu of things they could do for the day. And once a week on Tuesdays, they would go bowling. And so they had a 3-to-1 ratio with staff. And once they got reorganized, they would shuffle out into the cars and go off with the staff member for whatever they were doing all day in the community. And they go volunteer at different events, and and sometimes they'd have field trips. They'd go to like a zoo or something. And he did really well there, and we loved that for him. And people in the community knew him and recognized him because he was out serving and doing things and participating in our community. COVID kind of shut that down. They eventually started back sort of on a altered basis, where then you had to wear a mask all day. They had to have 3 consumers with 1 staff assigned, that they stayed together like the bubble. So he lost that choice over what his activities were, because he had to do the same activities everybody else in his bubble were doing with that staff member driving them around. You're having to wear the mask for 8 hours, except for when eating. And it was like, what if I don't like the 2 other people assigned to my bubble? He started having some anxiety and some refusal about going. And I think also the whole COVID thing was making him anxious about going out in the community. So he stopped. And in the same time frame, we also lost the habilitation aide that we had to work with him from home, and do community-based or work with him at home on organizing his room and doing his chores and all of that. So we've had no services at all now for almost a year, and no supports. His sister was in a similar program, but she's got more chronic health issues going on, and she's had to step back from just about everything. Her quality of life is very altered. We've got a new diagnosis in the last 3 years with chronic vomiting syndrome. It's like a variation of migraines. So she just gets sick and she doesn't know when she's going to get sick. And sometimes it's multiple times in a day, and with abdominal pain. Just not a good thing for her to be able. She never knows like if she can go out and commit to anything, because she might start feeling bad 20 minutes before it and not be able to go. So we're very loose with her, flexible as far as our expectations for what she's able to do or participate in, family and otherwise. So she's home right now, and has been pretty much home for two years straight. So we had some support services for her, but her hab aide left even before Christopher's did. So we've really been on our own with both of them, and they both need some supports. And as you said, who does that fall on?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, so falls on mom, falls on you.
Yes.
So do you have a schedule that's 24/7 there's no days off. You've got kids that are there that wake up, that you have to care for, right? I mean, there is no.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
especially like
saying-
Rachel, if the vomiting hits in the middle of the night,
No.
yes, which it does sometimes. So then she's up and she's able to take care of like washing her own sheets and stuff. But once she's up, she doesn't have the impulse control to like not be talking and be quiet and just try to manage it. She's running around talking to herself and like, okay, I got to go wash my sheets, and waking up half the household. And with Tim working full time from home too, her crazy hours are kind of
No.
affecting him as well.
Right.
So yeah, it's chronic sleep deprivation. Yeah,
Right.
you
Right.
should know that. That's
Yeah. Well,
it's
that's
hard.
the one thing that we were blessed with. For 3 or 4 years, he was up every few hours, but after he was about 4, he started sleeping through the night. And that's the only thing that saved me, honestly, is I know that when I put him in, I always say because he's in a wheelchair and he's completely non-ambulatory, I don't have to worry about him running away. So
Yeah,
put him in bed, that's where he's staying unless I get him up.
right.
And so, because I don't do well with, after a few days of no sleeping. So, oh my gosh, I just don't think people understand. They just don't. And I
Right.
think it's very fascinating too, the how COVID affected not just the kids in the school or the guy at work or right now I've heard that China, Shanghai is locked down again.
Yeah, they
And
are.
I heard that and I was like, well, but you're a guy and you have a full-time job and you're there in Shanghai and it really sucks. And it was scary. I mean, there were some scary things. He was talking about running out of food and stuff like that. It's very scary, but there's so many other things that people don't know about,
Mhm.
that if they knew about it, they would be like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Like they say, cancer doesn't know that
Right,
there's COVID, right? Your
right.
illness doesn't know that there's a COVID problem and your doctor can't see you. So
But
all of that stuff. But
in some respects though, yeah, I mean, COVID's been hard for our most vulnerable people, and but it's also in some ways brought other folks into our world where, we've had to be hunkered down for years for different reasons. Rachel's immune system can be a little wonky. We got to be careful of who or what we expose her to.
right.
So, not being able to like do something like attend church regularly because things are happening, and to suddenly have all that available on YouTube or Zoom or I mean,
Yes.
for the first time in years, I'm able to participate in a regular women's group through our church on Thursday nights because they went to Zoom, and they've
Yeah.
determined that there's enough people out there that they need to keep that. And I'm like,
Oh,
thank you. And the YouTube, the church is doing services on YouTube, and it's a small church, but since they've seen the numbers of people who are watching online, for people who can't always make it in, that's us.
right.
I now have regular attendance via online, whereas my attendance had been so spotty because I just never knew what our day was going to bring,
Right.
and or if I'd be able to get out of the house and take one of them with me and go to church or not. So
That's interesting.
it's a
our
mixed
church,
thing.
yeah, you know what? And there were other things like, I remember when they started putting the plexiglass up at different places, and I remember thinking, I think that's a good idea. I think we should
Yeah,
keep that plexiglass up there.
yeah.
And there were a lot of things where it's like, why didn't we have open buffets? I don't think that's a good idea to have open buffets. So I'm okay with some of these things. So some of
Yeah.
the things I remember, and this is crazy. I don't know what you guys did in your church, but in our church, they would have the bread and the water, and they would just pass it around. They'd pass the little
Oh,
around, And I
right.
remember even before COVID, I remember just one day it hits me that I'm watching these little kids. They're picking up this piece. Oh, and I don't want that piece. How about that piece? Oh, I'll take that piece. Or they just grab a
Yeah.
handful of bread. And I
Yeah.
remember one day watching this going, what? I
Yeah.
didn't even think about this, And so then during COVID, they before they completely locked down, they started breaking up the bread and putting it in individual cups. I was like, good idea. I believe we should keep that up. And of course,
Yeah.
they didn't. The minute COVID stopped, they
Oh, no.
but they also had the Zoom thing, and it was so great for so many older people
Right.
In our situation where we're at, they decided to stop doing Zoom because people weren't coming to church. So they're like, I'll just stay home. So we're like, okay, that's not going to work. But it worked out really good for me. I mean, I used my, although I look at his closet and I go, oh gosh, I haven't had a chance to dress you all up in that cute suit and that nice tie in years, because I kind of enjoyed doing that. And so, but there's always, I guess, some certain things that you learn from, but so.
We didn't even have a sinus infection for 2 years because we were that plexiglass and social distancing, and it was like the healthiest 2 years we've had as a family.
I know, you never heard any other illnesses being talked about for that. I mean, that's true. So you start going, we need to rethink this a little bit. Okay, so how long ago was it that you were diagnosed with you have some heart issues going on?
I have heart issues. Gosh, it's almost 4 years now, I think. I know it was 3 years in January with the diagnosis, I think. I'm losing track, but
I know. Isn't that amazing?
I had a really bad case of the flu in 2018 or 2019, and just never felt like I got back to, I've had a long history with asthma, so I thought I had just set off my asthma, and months of feeling dizzy and lightheaded and wheezy all the time and very short of breath, sort of like the long haulers with COVID. I just did not get back to my baseline, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I was feeling like death wormed over, even though I was long past the flu that I'd had.
Right.
And I was supposed to have surgery to repair a hernia, and they did the pre-op, and they found I had all these extra beats getting thrown off by my heart, and she thought it was just her leads, that she placed them wrong and it was picking up a wrong thing. So then they had to repeat the test, and she said, you're in a bigeminy and trigeminy pattern. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, I feel fine, but I said, yeah, I've felt these fluttery things. I thought it was like upset stomach or something, or was wheezing in my chest. I didn't know it was actually my heart fluttering. If I hadn't been having the elective surgery, we wouldn't have picked that up, and I wouldn't have gotten a referral to the cardiologist and the pulmonologist, because I kept saying how I felt like I was going to pass out just walking from my back door to the car.
Right.
And they stuck me in a monitor, found out my oxygen when I was weight bearing was dropping into like the low 80s. And I was like, well, that explains why I'm like, the room starts going black.
Right.
And then they found this heart pattern and put me on oxygen and told me to stop having caffeine and stop my ADHD meds. And so all the things that kept me going when I'm sleep deprived, I couldn't take anymore, and can't stay as organized as I used to. But the cardiologist was great. He found a medication that's normally used for blood pressure. I don't have a blood pressure problem, but it helps chemically alter the way my heart is beating, so that it's beating, draws out the beats and doesn't do the extra little flutter beats in the middle. So that has been a big help. I'm still needing oxygen when weight bearing, especially when I'm seated, it's not so bad, but when I get up and walk around, I need like 2 to 3 liters of oxygen going. So
do you think that the flu that you had, that there was some kind of a virus?
That's our theory. We just don't have, there is no like visible damage to the heart muscle, but the theory is that the cardiologist said he had kind of seen that before, that the virus did some kind of damage in there, to whether it was the nerves around your heart or the muscle or whatever, that it had done something changed there. And so it wasn't beating the way it should. I'm not processing oxygen anymore the way I should. And it's helped some losing weight. I had major surgery last summer. I had a gastric sleeve surgery. In fact, the last day of Chris's Hab aid was the day of my surgery in June last year. So I came home the next day and we had no supports, and I was home recovering from surgery.
Oh,
so yeah, I know.
Like,
Fortunately, we
get
had
out of
plenty.
bed and go take care of that. It's like, well, let's just talk about the fact that I'm
I
cut
just
open.
had, yeah, I just had major abdominal surgery. Yeah.
Mm.
But that's been a big help too. It's been part of my journey is now I've lost like 80 pounds over the last 2 years.
Wow.
Because of it's helping. I've been able to reduce how much oxygen I need, but it's not 100% yet. So
Right.
hopefully I'll keep working on it.
That, and I was so impressed when you told me the story when a bit before about how your brand new little baby girl is like 4 months old, your husband passes away. And I
Yes.
don't think, if I remember right, I don't think you had gotten the diagnosis, or no, you knew right away when she was born because
Yeah, because of her brother. Yeah,
Yeah.
they both have microcephaly.
Right. So
Yeah.
you were like, uh-oh, here we go again. But
Yeah.
so you had a little bit of preview of coming attractions, but now you've got to deal with the grief of losing your partner. And but then when you told me that you went back to school,
Yeah.
and I was so impressed with that because I mean, that's what it's all about. The fact that you were like, all right, I've got a family I have to support, I have kids I have to take care of,
Right.
I have to have some kind of credibility, in order to provide for my family. So
Mhm.
have you retired from that, working with a special ed? Are you completely retired from that?
I've had to go out on disability now. It's been 3 years now. So I'm out. And I'm not pulling down my state retirement yet because that would be way too early. I'm gonna try to wait till I'm 65 to pull that down. I could have taken it on disability, but it would have reduced the payments.
Right.
So I'm trying to leave that there. And just we're getting by on our Social Security right now. So it's not ideal. Financially, it's been very hard.
Right.
And we're probably gonna have to make some changes here soon to alter how and where we live
Right.
to make sure that we're provided for and not being homeless.
Right.
So
So when you were in the process of moving from Virginia,
mhm,
even now with your kids and their medical situation,
mhm.
what would you say? What's your first reaction? Like you say, your daughter gets a new diagnosis. This is something new. She hasn't had that before. What's the first thing that you do to go, all right, we got to figure this out? Are you like, we're going to Google this and figure out, or what's your first step?
uh, it probably started even before we got the diagnosis, just trying to figure out what is this condition? What are these symptoms that we're presented with? I mean, it took a long time to get to the chronic vomiting syndrome diagnosis with her. We went through 2-3 years of not knowing and her throwing up and it looking like gallbladder and having scans for that. And then thinking it was the problems with this when your gut is slow and it's not moving the food through the way it should be.
Right.
We looked at motility issues there to see maybe she was not having good motility and was backing up and that was making her throw up. Every time she'd have these bouts with the abdominal pain, we were running into maybe it's her appendix. We were going to the ER and she was having to get IVs for hydration. So it took a while to get a balance where.
When you do that, when you
Mhm.
say, she's throwing up, she's in pain, we have to go to the
Right.
ER.
Right.
What does that look like for you? I mean, she's ambulatory, she can get in the car, but you have 2 other children at home, well, adults.
Right.
So do you throw them in the car as well? Or what, are they able to stay home by themselves, or what, how do you handle that?
Well, the oldest one can be in charge for a while. He's able to do that. Okay. So then her brother, his ISP, which is the individual support plan, the way we've said it says that he can be home for like an hour on his own. If we have a plan for what he's doing, he knows, like, okay, this X hour, I'm going to be working on my laundry, or I'm going to be doing YouTube on my phone, or if there's a plan for what he's doing, then it's good for that little bit of time. Longer than that, though, he's going to need supervision. And his brother's here if he needs help. If there is no brother at home as a backup, I mean, in the past, I would try to work it out to go like call my parents who are now not as able to do things,
Right.
and have him go visit grandmommy and granddaddy while I take Rachel to the ER, or just, yeah. With COVID, that's not an option. Have him go with me. Before COVID, if I had to,
True.
he could have gone with me, but now
Yes.
they're limiting who can go back. And
Yes.
yeah,
And you can't stay in the waiting room.
no.
So,
Well, you can to some extent,
yeah,
because he's close by. If they needed me, they could get me.
true.
And there's TV to watch, but not in a waiting room now with people coughing and COVID. And
Yes.
no,
Yes.
that's not happening.
Oh,
So it's where it's important for us to get those habilitation support services back in place. So we have that person that's his support person that's here with him and keeping him engaged and doing appropriate things, so I can go and do
right.
the other things I need to do, like
Right.
take somebody else to the doctor or the
Yeah.
ER or whatever. Yeah. If emergency comes up in the middle of the night, that's actually good because they're all sleeping and I don't have to worry about them. I can just take her and go.
Well, and I also like what I mean, you were very honest with saying how it wasn't like you took her to the doctor and they went, oh, gee, I wonder if it's chronic vomiting syndrome. You had to
No,
go through, maybe it's her gallbladder, maybe it's this, which we all do, you know.
right.
So that's why they call it practicing physician, so
Yeah.
it's a matter of, running all the tests and this kind of
Yeah.
thing, and then waiting and waiting and waiting, and they don't know, you have
Right.
to, you're on the team.
Well, and every time you schedule one of those tests, it's like 2-3 months out before they could
Yes.
even get you in. I mean, meanwhile, she's in pain and she's having all
Yeah.
these problems, and she lost like 40 pounds in a matter of like 6 months. And thank goodness we've got the weight pretty stable now. I should have invested in Gatorade when all of this started, but
Yeah.
the hydration drinks are really helping a lot, and altering her diet to keep it very bland, to things that she can keep down better. Just, yeah. For a long time, she was only like eating rice and bananas and Gatorade, and that wasn't exactly the healthiest thing. But
Wow.
as we're figuring out like what medications help her with the nausea and other things, it's evolving. And this particular diagnosis is a diagnosis of exclusion. It's sort of like we have to rule out all these other things, and then what's left is, okay, we think it's chronic vomiting syndrome. You have to go see this specialty I'd never heard of before, a neurogastroenterologist
Right.
at the big city hospital in Pittsburgh, who's the only
Hmm.
one in Pennsylvania, I guess, who does this,
Right.
and talk to that doctor and start getting treatment for this diagnosis that is what we give you when we haven't been able to figure anything else out. So
Right. Have you found that I'm assuming that with Medicaid, Medicare, that you have some kind of a caseworker. Do you have a caseworker that like checks in on you? I have
yeah,
that. TJ's on Medicare now, and so I have a caseworker that calls every 3 months to make sure that everything's okay, which is great. She's amazing. Do you have something like that?
I don't have it through Medicare, but because they're both on waiver funding, I don't know if you know what waiver is.
No.
Waiver is what pays for all the in-home supports. It's a Medicaid program that is not income dependent, that helps pay for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities or physical disabilities be able to live in their own community and not be institutionalized. So they have a case manager through the county who's called their supports coordinator, and she checks in. She has to visit. It's been virtual for 2 years, but monthly we meet with her, and then annually we develop their plan for what their support needs are, and keep her up to date on the medical stuff that's going on and everything. So should anything ever happen to me, there's a whole plan out there with a wealth of all their information, the medications they're on, who their doctors are, what their diagnoses are, what support needs they have, what are the goals that we have set, what are the things that they like to do, what are the things you should avoid doing with them because that's not so good. It's all in this one big plan called an ISP, individual support plan. So that person's there. I
Do you
believe
think
there's medical case management available through the insurance. And I took advantage of it one time with Chris when we were going through some seizure stuff with him. But honestly, they didn't have a lot of help for me other than what I'd already found out on my own and the
Yeah.
specialists. And
Yeah.
so,
Just more of a checking up, make sure that
yeah,
you're still disabled. You're the ones
yeah,
that got miracle cure
yes.
overnight. Yeah, that's all. They're just
Yeah,
checking to
like
make
Social
sure that,
Security every 5 years wanting to make sure you're still disabled to send you that money. I'm
yeah,
like, well, I don't know what part of these diagnoses is
yeah.
temporary, but
I wish they would somehow flag those things because, cerebral palsy is brain damage, not going to get better.
yeah,
You
right.
need to check in every 90 days. He still has cerebral palsy,
It's a waste of taxpayer money to keep having these checks that are supposed to ferret out fraud, but they're spending way more money trying to figure out fraud, find the fraud than actually, I
Yeah,
think any good that they're doing. So
yeah.
it's
So
a waste.
do you think, what would be your thing if someone was listening to this, they've just gotten a
Mhm.
diagnosis, they
Okay.
don't know what to do, what would you say the first step is?
Assuming you have a trusted primary care physician, I would start there.
Yeah,
Whether it's the pediatrician or whatever, we have a wonderful primary care group that we see. They're all the ones that we see are DOs, not MDs.
oh,
And it's a very holistic in approach. I credit one of them with catching Christopher's esophagus issues, that I thought it was just autism and a food sensitivity.
right,
And he's like, no, I hear funny, weird things with the esophagus going on here. We think you need to go see the gastroenterologist. And that led to finding out he was having this whole food allergy that we didn't know, where his esophagus was swelling up and not having like hives. And that literally, when he was gagging on the food, he was literally choking on it because his esophagus was swelling up in reaction to that food. And sorry, I'm way off topic again. But
no,
having a doctor you trust who, um, they don't, yeah, I know primary care is not a specialist in
yeah,
certain areas, but if you have somebody that you trust who listens to you,
yeah,
who takes time, who respects that you're the parent and you know your child better than probably anybody else,
right,
that's a great first place to start. And then kind of like, I think of them as like being somebody on my team. And then we're like, okay, we're going to develop a plan for how we're going to figure this out. They're part of our team. And yes, I might be doing research on Google or talking to friends from other support groups who have kids who have similar disabilities. And unfortunately, we've been plugged in for 26 years now with a group of parents who have kids with microcephaly. And I used to moderate the listserv for that one. And it's just nice to be able to write to my hundreds of friends all over the world and say, has anybody ever dealt with this? And what was it? What was the diagnosis? And who did you go see for that? And
okay,
so, but it starts with the primary care, and then I start gathering information and trying to reassure my child we're going to figure this out and go from there.
you know what, you're so right, because I remember, when we finally got the diagnosis from the specialist, then that was it, then he put me in charge, now you go over here. And of course, we were fortunate enough to be near Oregon Health Science University.
Mhm,
But the doctor was at Good Samaritan, but the physical therapist was OHSU. And then they recommend this. And then once he got in the school system, the physical therapist, the speech therapist, they worked with
mhm.
him. And so they would be the ones that would say, I think he's getting a little big for this wheelchair. I think we need to get him a
Time to
bigger
get a new one.
wheelchair.
Yeah.
So really they helped create the team. And then like you said, we had feeding issues, and eventually I got talked into going to a gastroenterologist, and then you find the neurologist. And so they really do, the primary care sends you out and starts all the feelers and starts bringing in the other people.
Mhm,
But I love that idea of finding a support group.
mhm.
Um, because like you said, one of my other guests has a daughter with a very rare thing too, and you find other people and they have suggestions, and you're like, oh, I never thought about that. And
Mhm.
there's always a spectrum a little bit, for everybody has things that maybe they don't have to
Right.
worry about, but it's still, but and I love how you were talking about, it's not just in your town, it's around the world.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes. It was so heartening to, we would have people that would come and join our support group who were in countries where the neurologist would say this was the only child they knew who had this condition.
Wow.
And they would come into our group and plug in, all of a sudden have 1,400 parents from all over the world that had a child with that condition that they could talk to and find out, you
Oh.
know, what were some of the therapies that had worked. And, you know, it was just a great support to have that and to bounce ideas off, and at the same time be able to give back, so that what we had learned the hard way was something we could pass forward to somebody else, so they didn't have to figure it out. The information's there. So.
Right, right. Well, that's excellent. Well, once again, I can't believe, I mean, you're just this encyclopedia of knowledge. And I love the fact that you're vulnerable enough to share with everybody and let
Oh.
everyone know, you know, what it's like in the real world. This is the real world.
It is.
And I love that hopefully that what you've told people. And you know, if you don't like your primary care physician,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
get another one.
Find another one. We
Find
had to
another
do that.
Yeah.
You know, when Christopher was 12 months old and the family doctor was leaving the room to go look something up, and then I happened to go to the restroom and I saw her sitting in her office flipping pages through her neurology textbook trying to figure out what to do. I was like, okay, we're going to go find a pediatrician who has experience working with kids with microcephaly. And we did, and we found a wonderful pediatrician, you know, not even that far away. And all of a sudden we were getting referrals to early intervention and things that we weren't getting with the other doctor, who was trying to say, oh, this could be normal, we'll wait and see. And everything I know about early intervention now is the sooner you start it, the better. Get those therapies going. So yeah, if you have a doctor that doesn't listen to you or doesn't respect you, it just kind of brushes you off or acts patronizing, it's time to find somebody else. Find someone that will really work with you, be part of your team.
That's so true. What I think, if I remember correctly, what you said was, we keep trying to get Virginia on these things, and she's, you know, she lives in a different time zone, and
yes,
you know, it hasn't worked out yet, but one of these days we're going to get her. But I remember you saying that you found friends through the Facebook group that you had.
Yeah. Jenny's one of them.
Yeah. And I love that you can have that connection. It's something that other people, you know, didn't have. And I don't think people understand the isolation, what isolation does.
Right.
I just had my naturopath. I don't take TJ there, but for me, he said he had a client that had a wheelchair accessible vehicle, but then it started breaking down and started having problems with it, and it couldn't get it fixed. And before he knew it, he didn't have transportation, and so he was so isolated. He's finally checked himself into like a nursing home, because you know, all he needs is a car. All he needs is a car.
That's terrible.
To get him out there. And you know, it's the isolation that these chronic illnesses, like you said, you have a daughter that has an immune system, and it's the isolation that is so depressing and discouraging. And and then, like you said, and then I remember even when TJ aged out of the school system, and like you were talking about your son that enjoyed that day program that he went to, and now all of a sudden he's at home. Where's his friends? Where's his activities? And now he's isolated. He's at home.
Right.
And,
it's hard to get him back out there too at this point.
Yes.
He's kind of become a hermit.
Right. Well, all right. What do you have planned? What does Cindy have planned for Cindy? Anything?
Oh.
You said that once everybody goes to bed, you have a little bit of time.
Oh, yeah. My guilty pleasure is playing video games. I have some online friends, and I enjoy all the Harry Potter stories. So there's some games that I play, and some nerdy friends who have podcasts that I help moderate their Twitch streams and stuff. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, no, it's good. And one of the things about becoming widowed was that I had to kind of rediscover who I was before I was married. And there were things I had set aside, hobbies that I hadn't done in a long time. And every now and then I find comfort in starting some of those things again. So like playing the piano or just listening to music, or this past year I took up knitting after 40 years. I hadn't knit.
Oh,
And I made the kids for Christmas all their own wool hats. And now I'm working on a rather complicated mitten pattern for my daughter with kind of a Fair Isle 2-color yarn thingy in it, and trying to build my skills. I have a goal by the end of this year to make myself my own Icelandic wool sweater. So I had one years ago, but so I've set a goal for that. And yeah, I'm just working slowly toward. I made the hats first. That was something simple.
yeah.
Now the learning to do the stranded knitting work with the mittens is leading to eventually doing the stranded knitting work with my sweater. So
I
yeah.
love that, because you and one of my other guests said the same thing. It's trying to remember who we were before we
Don't lose that.
Yes. And then you go, wait, I loved that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that again. That's such an important thing. I don't know. This could be my feminism coming out on me, but I don't know if men ever forget who they were, because they didn't have to give up who they were to become a father, or, a husband.
Not a lot of men, but there are men who I think,
yeah,
in fairness, do give up a lot of things. But yeah, no, a lot of the guys, like you said, 60% of that caregiving falls on the woman in the home. And so the guy is still out there doing his Wednesday night bowling. And
yeah. Well,
Mom
listening to these guys talk, sometimes I'll listen, I'll overhear a group of men talking over some event or something, and it's like, I don't think you guys ever did get out of high school, because that was a long time ago that you were the quarterback, or whatever they talk about. I don't often hear a lot of women going, when I was that, in high school. They've maybe moved on a few years.
In defense, though, I mean, I just spent a weekend in Pittsburgh at the USA Disabled Hockey Festival with a whole lot of dads who are there with their kids with disabilities in their ice hockey programs, being supportive, helping coach, helping some kid with autism get his hockey gear on to get out on the ice. There are wonderful guys out there who are committed to their kids.
Absolutely.
And maybe they get to share their love of ice hockey with their kid, but it was there are good guys out there. I don't want to bash them all, but I also know a lot of marriages that broke up because the dad couldn't handle that and basically left the marriage emotionally. And when some guys, when it's not something they can fix, they are, they have no coping mechanism for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I have seen both, and it definitely isn't gender-based. I have some women that I know that also walked out of situations.
The same.
So
yeah.
It's definitely just what you're made out of. So, well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Once again, I've been fed. I appreciate your time and your knowledge and your sharing. And
same to you.
It's just amazing. So unfortunately, I think we'll probably end up talking again one of these days. You work it out with Virginia. I want to hear more about the hockey.
Okay.
Put your pictures up on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, we have to get Jenny on. It's interesting now where she and I are, and some of our other friends as our kids are now young adults, and how things have changed. And she's got Michael home now, but they've carved out a really nice life for themselves. And I'm dying to hear her story, and I'd love to get both of you guys on and just hear about the friendship and how you support each other and everything else. So thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll talk again.
All right.
Hopefully there will be some kind of sound when this is right.
Yes, I hope.
I don't care, even if there wasn't. We had a great conversation. So there you go.
Thank you so much for your patience through the audio issues. Bye.
Well, once again, wasn't she amazing? I mean, put yourself in her shoes and try to imagine a day in a life. She's just amazing. And what she's done, I forgot to ask her about all the wonderful hockey stuff. She's done some amazing things helping these kids find a sport and an activity that they love, and then how the family's all getting involved in it. It's absolutely amazing. She is very, very visible, and I love her. So anyway, thanks for listening today, and we'll talk again next week. All right, bye-bye.